India. The emerging power in defense manufacturing. Empowering our armed forces in the high mountains, fighting battles in the harsh terrain of deserts, and securing India's vast coastline. The Indian defense industry is marching ahead with strength and power, continuously engraving the success story of Make in India. A well-developed ecosystem has created indigenous capabilities in naval systems, aerosystems, missile, electronics and land systems, keeping pace with the global trends in war-fighting technologies. Greater emphasis on self-reliance, increased participation of the Indian industry with startups, MSMEs, ordnance factories and PSUs as partners. A robust defense and aerospace industry base has been created by simplification of procedures, new policy for indigenization, innovations for defense excellence, offering government test facilities and proof ranges to industry, dedicated team to facilitate the private industry, encouraging intellectual property culture in defense corridors in Uttar Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, reforms in offset policy. Such initiatives have strengthened the ecosystem and defense manufacturing base of the country, resulting in growing investments, production and exports. And the journey of excellence continues. After the remarkable success of DefExpo 18, Ministry of Defense is ready to showcase the digital transformation of defense at Lucknow, a vibrant manufacturing hub of Uttar Pradesh, focusing on innovation and emerging technologies, bringing in a paradigm shift from conventional to futuristic technologies. A show of India's renewed and strengthened defense and aerospace industry, showing alongside the experience of global defense manufacturers. Come, experience the power of growth and commitment. DefExpo 2020. Explore the world of opportunities.
Hello, good afternoon, namaste. A very warm welcome to yet another series of webinars from NEGT Digital India and Ministry of Defense. My name is Bhumika and I welcome you on behalf of National E-Governance Division LMS team. I will be your moderator for today's second webinar from the series of run-up webinars for DefExpo 2020. These webinars are a collaborative effort of Department of Defense Production, Ministry of Defense and NEGT Digital India LMS team, Ministry of Electronics and IT. As India is emerging as a defense manufacturing hub, this edition of DefExpo is focused on digital transformation in aerospace and defense sector. DefExpo 2020 will bring the leading technologies in the defense sector under one roof and provide a myriad of opportunities for government, private manufacturers, and startups. The event is scheduled from 5th to 8th February 2020 at Lucknow, India. As we proceed, you will get to hear a lot from our eminent speakers in these webinars. It is my pleasure to begin this session by introducing Mr. Toby Simon, President, Synergia Foundation. Along with him is Major General Moni Chandi, Chief Strategic Officer, Synergia Foundation, and Mr. Gopi Hanumanthappa, Managing Director, ThyssenKrupp. They are all joining us from HL Bengaluru and will speak on the topic digital transformation of defense. Also joining us is Captain Nagesh Jain from Department of Defense Production from NEGT Studio here at New Delhi. He would give us an overview of the webinar topic and our speaker today. Before I hand over, I will take you through certain housekeeping rules. I hope you can see on my screen. As you know, today's webinar is for 1 hour, approximately 1 hour, and would end at around 4 p.m. Indian Standard Time. I would request all the panelists to switch off their microphones and cameras when not in use. There is a chat option for our viewers. If you have any queries, any problems, please let us know through this option. There is also a Q&A section. If you have any questions for the webinar speaker on the content on this topic, please let us know your questions only through the Q&A section. The best question would be awarded. For the last webinar, as we have announced, we have a winner, Miss Sulbha Pandurang Kulkarni. She is a physics lecturer from MIT Junior College, Pandharpur. She has won this award for the best questions of our last webinar, which was conducted on 10th December. Also, there is a poll at the end. Please rate the quality of the webinar. This session is also being streamed live on YouTube on the Digital India YouTube Learning channel. We'll share the link shortly. With this, now I hand over to Captain Jain to introduce the topic and our speaker in detail. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bhumika. Good afternoon, everyone. We have with us today Mr. Toby Simon, who's the founder and president of Synergia Foundation, an independent think tank whose purpose is to augment decision-making at the policy level. Mr. Simon is a commissioner with the Global Commission for Internet Governance and also a member of the Trilateral Commission, which deals with finding solutions to the great geopolitical, economic, and social challenges of our times. He has served as a member on the advisory board of the Center for New American Security, which is a Washington, D.C. based think tank specializing in United States national security issues. He has also served on the advisory board of the International Council of the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at the John F. Kennedy School at Harvard, which deals with the various challenges of international security. Mr. Toby Simon is also a research associate at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He has been advisor to several international organizations, such as the World Health Organization, Medicines Sans Frontiers, and ADES, the European Agency for Development and Health. He holds an MBA and is a graduate from the Harvard Business School. Mr. Toby Simon will be speaking on the subject, digitization of defense, which refers to the assimilation of new technologies to meet future operational requirement of the armed forces. Rapid improvements in information and communication technologies have greatly enhanced the potential to synergize the nation's war-making capabilities by bringing all elements of the national power on a digital platform. Some of the new technologies which Mr. Simon will be talking about will include augmented reality, autonomous transportation control, robotics, drones, and artificial intelligence, amongst others. Rapid advancements in communication technology is transforming tomorrow's battle space. The capacity to disseminate more data in 5G networks will enable enhanced network receptivity through lower network latency and reduced energy consumption. This will enable mission transforming machine-to-machine communication over the network. For example, sensors from multiple locations can be used to develop a consolidated picture of the battleground in real time. Low motion to photon latency with 5G-enabled wireless virtual reality, mixed reality, and augmented reality could make our soldiers more potent. Lethal autonomous weapon systems, such as killer drones, micro-drone swarms, and other type of autonomous military robots are presently being developed. In modern militaries, the use of the digital platforms is empowering the military, enabling better continuity of operations and bringing the armed forces to a new level of combat readiness. The webinar by Mr. Toby Simon will throw light on the adaptation of the above technologies by the Defense Forces. Over to you, sir, at our Bangalore studio.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for giving the Synergia Foundation an opportunity and personally for us here to share some of our thoughts on the current discussion on digital transformation of defense. What I would attempt to do in the 8 to 10 minutes that I wish to speak is to provide an outline and context to this discussion by speaking about, first, about the transformation and how different is it from digitization. Second, about the idea of mechatronics. Third, providing the audience a context to this discussion. Why is digitization needed, or is it needed? And another important context would be the future of combat, because we are all talking about battles. Then I would like to speak about the threat, about blockchains, and finally, the challenges as we see it. But before I do this, let me introduce two of my esteemed colleagues, General Moni Chandi, who sits to my right as I sit, and Gopi Hanumantappa, who is the Managing Director of ThyssenKrupp. General Chandi is the Chief Strategic Officer of the Synergia Foundation. Now, first, let me speak about the word mechatronics. Defense, and especially in the aerospace world, is no more about boxes or hardware. It's basically become more an interdisciplinary learning and an interdisciplinary putting together of a number of vectors, which includes mechanical engineering, computational science, telecommunication, electronics. So this is no more about mechanics alone. So there is a huge transition from what we saw earlier in combat to what we are going to see in future. The second point is, why is digitization and digital transformation different? Digitization and digital transformation are essentially about technology, and this is where the similarity ends. Digital transformation is not digitization alone, but is more about aligning ourselves to the battlefield that is constantly changing and mutating. In digital transformation, you really have to look at the scenario from a much more holistic point than just looking at it as a digital or a digitization opportunity. And what is the context to what we are talking about? The context is the disruption of the global oil supplies on record was not, largest disruption of oil supplies on record was not caused by a bomber strike or a fast jet raid. Instead, the devastating attack, which cut off oil production and rocked energy markets by about 10% in a day, was brought about by the precise deployment of an unarmed swarm drone of very low cost and a series of cruise missiles. An equivalent of do-it-yourself kit was sufficient to blow up almost half of Saudi Arabia's oil output in September 2019. So is digital transformation required, or are we talking something well into the future? Today's digital age is empowering the military of being able to access secure, fluid, and timely flow of data and intelligence. And this is definitely the lifeblood of any modern military activity. The first Gulf War provided an insight into a fully connected, digitized battlefield. Since then, technology has gone far ahead with the Internet of Things, AI, cloud computing, data analytics, augmented and virtual reality, blockchain, and a number of further concepts that are coming up. Operation Iraqi Freedom showcased the digitization of the battle space, the use of GPS, SATCOM, and real-time imagery by aircraft to ground and smart ultra-kinetic weapons. Digitization also allowed C4I1SR to attain much higher heights, the credo being multi-source data analysis in real time in any mission environment and the timely dissemination to the right person for the right mission critical need. Modern weapons come with the confluence of many technologies: combat identification, friend or foe, mission computing systems, and mission-specific consoles. So what is the future of conflicts? The way we see it, the future of conflict will be limited theaters where there will be more deployment of special forces, drones, UAVs. That would be the battle of the future. And the threat of doing digitization to us is basically on the cyber front. It is going to be extremely difficult to ring-fence the cyber world, especially with the onset and the flow of quantum computing. Quantum computers can break any cryptography as on date. Just a word on blockchain. The immutability and peer-to-peer characteristics of the blockchain mean that a successful hack has to require enormous quantities of computing power. And this, we believe, will be one of the biggest deterrents when we build a cyber system that is more aligned to blockchains. And finally, the challenges. Digitization definitely, like anything, comes with multiple challenges. Creating an extensive operating environment for armed forces certainly provide greater operational benefit. However, handling and managing data remains a key concern, from data security to data spillover and threat. Internet-enabled terrorism and resorting to remote plotting represents a completely new genre of conflict for which militaries, conventional militaries, are ill-prepared. And finally, drones with AI is likely to redefine war by 2030. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Toby. I agree that there are a large number of technologies which is now available for us to use. But this is not a new phenomenon. The application of technology into warfare started many, many years ago, including in the Indian Army. The only thing is that right now, there are so many technologies available that it offers us a plethora of opportunities. And I think that, if we can talk of specific challenges which we face today and how technology can change that, we might be able to provide some very interesting insights. But I'll talk more about that as we progress. Would you like to add something to that?
Perhaps I could come from a framework where Toby's kind of highlighted about the products, and he talked about technologies. If you talk as a system, this is the products and technologies that sit under one nice little box. But other important box, what we're talking is how do we leverage this digitization and form of a digital transformation across the entire thing. And I think I would like to touch a little bit about digital transformation, and that's going to be key. Digitization is about the ability to reach the different levels where man has not been able to really get into in the past. That's one limit of it. The other part is obviously the digital efficiency that comes along with it. And we are talking of expanding this digital efficiency across the ecosystem of partners and ring-fencing it through various other elements of technologies to ensure that you have you move from what was called a platform-based command to basically a network-based command set of systems. So, there's this plethora of systems and technologies on the left, but very important element is the people element of it, which is where we talk about digital transformation. And that is something which perhaps I may want to dwell on as we speak.
May I start with an example? One of the challenges which our country faces is the problems of bombs and IEDs. We face the threat in J&K, we face the threat in the Maoist area, we face the threat in the Northeast. And the NSG conducts an annual international seminar where we get eminent people from across the world to speak to us. Now, I'll tell you what the situation is right now, and you see how technology can change it. Every time there is a bomb blast, we move an IED team from Delhi and an NIA team. They fly in a special aircraft to where the bomb explosion took place. And then they search the area for forensic evidence so that they can draw some lessons to decide the counter. Now, when we were sitting in this seminar in Delhi a few years ago, there was an American officer with experience from Afghanistan. And he says, we reach the bomb site like we do, but we try and look for two pieces of evidence, either a blood sample, a follicle, or a fingerprint. Normally one is enough, but if you get two, you run it from the site onto databases and you identify the bomber. And what he didn't tell us is that they can check the bomber by his mobile phone, identify his location, and a Predator drone and a Hellfire missile will do the rest. The solution is on the site itself. Now, that is one example of how you could use digital transformation to such amazing effect in the areas which challenge the armed forces today. But there are others as well.
Very clearly, I think that's a very nice thing we talked about, and I think Toby also alluded to data, which is actually the new bloodline for warfare, and it's a question of very clearly how secure and how fluid this data is, data and intelligence which come in together, which is what's going to form the key of tomorrow's attacks. I mean, not attacks, tomorrow's decision-making points. So what we really talked about was what's moved from perhaps a platform-based command to what's really moved to a network-based command, which is really creating and bringing this nice insights to deploy any kind of required solution to address the problem. Very clear that's very interesting. Yeah.
I would like to make an intervention and speak about the utility of the digital transformation, especially in the case of autonomous underwater vehicles. It's extremely important that we are able to secure the underwater, primarily because of the undersea cables, which carry 99%, the undersea submarine cables, which carry 99% of all internet traffic. And the biggest disaster is if somebody can snap it, and it's quite easy to snap it. Okay? Now, with the deployment of these autonomous underwater vehicles, we are able to scan the surface much better, look at areas where there are vulnerabilities, and try to intervene even before such an accident is going to happen. And I think there are more applications of this. Perhaps you might only want to comment.
Yes, if I can give you an example which is perhaps everyone understands. Virtually every year we come across a case where a CRPF convoy is ambushed on some road in the Naxal belt. And every time the case is exactly the same, an IED blows up, we lose a lot of people, and Maoists will launch an ambush on them. But today, the entire country is covered with remote sensing satellites. Is it possible to tap the satellites, which ISRO can? Is it possible to have a transponder where we can monitor the Naxal belt and actually see the roads on which repeated ambushes take place and monitor it from the air? And only if we have a doubt, maybe we could fly UAVs or drones over it to confirm that the road is clear before we move CRPF on it. Actually, if you think of it, if something gets flagged, the situation actually reverses. The hunter becomes the hunted. And CRPF will actually be on the offensive against Naxalites instead of being on the receiving end. And that's quite similar to what you said of underground cables. Where we have to protect ourselves, we must maintain surveillance over it. And I think digital transformation of defense gives us the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, just to add to what you're saying, the traditional battlefield, which was always around the land, sea, or the air, has obviously expanded more to different terrains. We talk in the space and perhaps even our day-to-day lives. The battlefield is everywhere, and you're talking of a convergence of technologies which are coming in every form and shape. And it's going to be quite interesting how we sense, how we fence, and how we create a sense of defense as well. That's going to be quite key to what we do on a day-to-day basis.
We also mentioned, the ability to use augmented reality. One of the big challenges which the normal soldier faces is that every time he fires his weapon, he has to raise the weapon to his eye, take aim to a sight and fire. But if we have augmented reality, there could be an aperture in your eyelids, which is always looking at the direction in which your weapon is pointing. And therefore, you don't have to raise that weapon. You can fire from the hip and you can get the target.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think the landscape of products which are being used to really defend yourselves is really changing. You're talking of, topics such as miniaturization, topics such as stealth, topics such as bionics, biomaterials, and all related new sense of technology which really can come into flow and really enable this element of sense, fence, and defense, as I call it, the tribe. That's going to be quite interesting. The three elements of how we leverage technologies, how we kind of adapt to them. The world is changing really fast, and one thing is for sure that while we digitize, we hinge upon information technology very strongly, and information technology is also equally changing rapidly, and assimilation of these technologies is going to be key. So on one aspect, while we're touching upon systems of technologies and various products, I think it's equally important that we touch the element of digital transformation, which is going to be key as well.
I might just add from a India focused perspective that as we move into this whole new world of digital transformation, mechatronics, etc., the base on which that we will build this is going to be computer science. And this is something that India is very good at. So it's basically that we will be able to leverage on a capability that we have. And that, I think, will be the force multiplier for us, because it's not something that we will have to outsource or externalize and buy. There will be capabilities that we can develop in India.
Bangalore being the software capital, I think we have enough talent to develop our own solutions there. If I could just give one more example. See, some of the things which really trouble people is the search operation. Time and again in the valley, you have a bus and you need to stop the bus, you need to unload the passengers, and you need to check every passenger against to see whether he's a terrorist or not. Now that's a very uncomfortable procedure for people who undergo it. But if we do leverage technology the way we're saying, a soldier can enter that bus through his spectacles. He can take a facial impression of all the passengers. It can be run across a database, identify if anyone is flagged, and only remove that person. The applications are phenomenal. If we see what we want and we apply ourselves in those specific areas.
Well, absolutely. I think, I keep coming back to this element of transformation, which is also very key. What you really describe is the emergence of the digital soldier really coming in, who really comes in and takes a battle or defense to the next level. And by the time we, the typical problem faced by most militaries across the globe is by the time a defense process takes place of procurement, the whole requirements of technologies would have already changed, because just the sheer complex nature of procurement which is in there. I think that's going to continue to be a problem. It's not going to go away. I think we need to recognize the fact that this is going to be a perennial way or problem which is going to plague every procurement process, whether it's global or local. So what really comes down to what we really talked is harnessing what which could do, or harnessing technologies which are as local as possible, rather than trying to keep pace with the changes out over there. Harness local, create some hybrid solutions, offer digital soldier, which could possibly enable interesting elements of digitization.
I think we have now engaged for about 30 minutes and probably 35 minutes, and probably we will be very happy to take questions. Captain Jane, if you would like to have questions flagged to us, we will be happy to take it. So I have a first question. How best lead digital transformation in defense? Which steps might an organization take to develop a digital strategy? This question is from Shubha Kulkarni. Gopi, would you like to?
Sure. Let me try and address this interesting question. Shubha, I think the way we would like to respond to you is many companies are definitely moving towards a digital landscape. But having said that, there are some companies which tend to which can adopt this faster, and some companies will adopt this at a much slower pace, much because they're not really threatened by the digital world. Likewise, when you look at militaries, what happens on one side, they have technologies which are fairly obsolete. So there's a huge cost of obsolescence over there. And at the same time, there is a need for them to gravitate, or not gravitate, move with a lot of speed to hypersonic technologies which are in there. So bridging this is not going to be easy, especially with very, very complex organizations like the defense. So I think what we're really talking about is about a digital transformation which needs to take place. And when we say digital transformation, it's about people. It's about the culture which comes in, and really the commitment of the senior leadership within the organizations to enable this digital transformation. Is there a clear-cut recipe for this? The answer is very clearly no. But there are multiple steps which can really be taken by complex organizations to minimize the distortion.
We have an extremely good second question from Narayan Kulkarni. Which type of difficulties would you likely face in an automation process? So which is the digital transformation process?
It's a very generic question, but if I look at difficulties which you face, is that in the field, in the army, we want solutions immediately. And normally the solutions which have got long gestation periods. And that is very difficult to accept, because by the time a prototype is fielded, the threat has changed and manifested in a different way. So I think one of the big challenges we have is to applying the technology quickly and fast. That, I think, is a very serious challenge which you have in the present area. But if I could suggest, there is a way out for this. And so many technologies are available, and plenty of resources are available. And like Toby mentioned in the beginning, if you can integrate the team, that means the entire development process, if it can be integrated into a team, and they are given a time-bound way to solve the problem, I think India has more than enough talent to solve it. And I'll qualify this with an example. About 15 or 20 years ago, we had a very serious IED problem in the valley. Remote-controlled IED were coming in from across the border, and a remote-controlled IED using a handheld citizen band radio set could be blasted by using a DTMF code. And we lost lots of people. We lost some senior army officers as well. And since terrorists could target leaders, it was a serious challenge. And at that point of time, the Indian Army came up with an innovative solution. They said, this is the problem, we need a solution. They never said what the solution was. They said, find the solution, but we need a solution to this problem. And we don't need the solution in 1 year or 2 years. We need the solution in weeks, maximum months. And a solution was involved in which we got onto the system and we sent all possible DTMF codes. And one of them would be the actual DTMF code, and we could pre-initiate the IED at a time of our choosing. And that eliminated the problem. So I think that the answer to both the first question and the second question is that you need to form teams, integrated teams across the development chain, and identify the problems you have and put solutions with where you can get immediate answers.
I think I will just add here what General Chandy was mentioning and Gopi, when we look at a conflict, we always look at a conflict with somebody which is far away. No, you have conflicts internally. And so when you are applying your technology, it should be that it is beneficial And there is a use case, a specific use case for you to apply this. So that makes it more relevant, that makes it much better, so that we are able to resolve issues. We have another interesting question that has come up from Prashant Singh. His question is more on Industry 4.0. He wants to sort of understand the correlation between Industry 4.0 and the digital transformation of defense.
Maybe I'll just respond to this. I think when we're talking Industry 4.0, really we're talking about digitization. I think we want to really separate two topics. One is digitization, which is about bringing about efficiency into everything that you're doing, and connecting it with with interesting underlying technologies like blockchain and AI and AR related bits with whatever platforms that you take on. But when you're talking about digital transformation, really you're talking about people. I think that's something that is very different. So we need to kind of keep these two things very separate, because digitization and digital transformation, in my opinion, are two separate elements by themselves, but they all obviously they need to work together in order to achieve results. Yeah.
We have another question from Ishwar Sagar. How do you take care of IT security during digital transformation? I think it's a very interesting question. How do you take care of IT security?
It's a very valid and it's a real challenge. But I think the point to remain is that when we started using wireless technology, we knew the enemy could listen in to us. We knew that the enemy could also get onto our system and he could manipulate us. So we have to find solutions to this problem. There's no one answer to it, but we have to use the technology and find ways to overcome it.
The question is, if you're asking for what's the specific IT security paradigm or narrative that one can propose, I think that is going to be an even bigger challenge, because you will have to study how you're going to integrate each of these systems, because they are not one single solution. There are multiple solutions, and you'll have to basically see how you can create air gaps in most of them to ensure maximum security and deterrence. We have a question from Vipin Sharma. What are the drawbacks of going towards a more digitized battle space?
Honestly, that's a difficult question to respond to. It's a nice question, though. But the fact is, I don't think you can totally eliminate the man from really doing what he does. Digitized battle space is nothing but, let's call it in many ways, a video game at work. Obviously, there are lives at stake in this game. It's inevitable. I do see this taking place in shape and form in years to come. There's no second thoughts about it. I think we all look at how we could minimize the loss of life. Very clearly, we would see digital soldiers at play with autonomous robots at work. We'll see very clearly right now, we already see swarm sensing technologies with AI able to, with precision munitions, which go to what needs to be done. We'd also see stealth technologies coming in together. So in all this, basically, you would say that, hey, where's the man element in it? The man element would be, as always, sitting behind the remote and guiding this, in my opinion. So that's why I call it a video game at work. Only thing is, lives hopefully will not be lost in the process. Yeah.
You know, if I may add, the biggest risk is the probable over dependence on the machine. And if you look, if we take AI like a black box, there is no guarantee that that there couldn't be a security leak or a mistake that is being committed. So I think an accident, to me, is one of the biggest risks if we are talking about a cyber Pearl Harbor. first Pearl Harbor was also some sort of a mistake. So even in cyber, that could be something that we should be extremely mindful of.
And it's an interesting question, Vipin. Every time I do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats, I always have difficulty identifying the difference between a threat and an opportunity. So the same way here, when you talk of digital transformation of defense, there are threats, but I think those threats can also become opportunities. And let me give you the example. In 1989, the US government undertook a study on the generations of warfare, and they called it the first generation, second generation. And at the end of the Second World War, we came into what we call as third generation warfare. Now you take your mind forward from that point of time to the Mumbai attacks, when 10 young men, terrorists, came in and held the entire city to ransom. Now we have, of third generation warfare, we have aircraft. We had an aircraft carrier then. We have a Su-30 aircraft, and we have an MBT battle tank. But none of those weapons, which are the magnificent weapons of third generation warfare, were useful in Mumbai when we were under attack. So fourth generation warfare has shifted the focus to the individual. And in the individual, I think if we target the individual, which is the counter to fourth generation warfare, we could eliminate the threat before it takes place. Toby said a cyber attack, a Pearl Harbor kind of cyber attack. I think that if you are vigilant, you can preempt that attack or even prevent that attack before it takes place. And that is why I think they have the adage, eternal vigilance is the price of our freedom. And I think we need to take on digital defense, digital transformation of defense full head on.
And if I also may add, Vipin, the biggest, second biggest or biggest challenge that I would look at is the low cost that an adversary needs to do such an attack on you. You don't have to build big battleships or aircrafts to come and target a critical infrastructure. So when you look at digitizing, the big risk is you're opening up fronts for people, non-state actors, or countries, disgruntled people, to come in and attack you. And the challenge in attack is every time you have to be right. But for the adversary, he needs to be only right once. We have another good question from that's all we have now. Are there any other questions that General Captain Jane would like to flag, or somebody else?
Okay, questions. Yeah. There is one question from Mr. Veda Prakash. He's asking, how can we adapt digital transformation in electronic warfare and radar technologies?
Can you repeat the question again?
This question is, how can we adapt digital transformation in electronic warfare and radar technologies?
I think I would come back to something which I mentioned earlier. I think we're talking of perhaps digitization of radar technologies. Sorry, can I get a question? Sorry, Captain, could you repeat the question again? I don't seem to find the question.
The question is from Mr. Veda Prakash.
Transformation.
We found it.
Yeah, we found it. Okay. You're talking of digital transformation and electronic warfare and radar technologies. I think when we talk in digital transformation, again, we'd like to make a distinction between digitization and digital transformation. Transformation is the ability to carry on the technologies that we adopted by way of digitization by people. And really, we are talking of people being able to use these technologies for the purpose that they're meant for. I think the issue which is really going to plague us is very clearly we're coming in from an age of a quasi-digital, where I call it a combination of analog and some digital technologies coming into play, to a full-fledged tech-based world. And when you go into this world, very clearly there are a lot of risks which come along with a lot of advantages as well. The ability to learn to distinguish is going to be key, and we're really talking of cyber warfare, which comes into play. And to add to it, I think very clearly, maybe Moni, you could add some lines.
See, your question that how can we use digital transformation of defense in electronic warfare and radar technology? I think Toby mentioned it right in the beginning, that the aim of digital transformation is to bring all elements of national power onto the same digital platform. So when we look at electronic warfare, or when we look at radar, these are two inputs which come in. Let's take the case of, again, the example which Toby took of the Aramco factory in Saudi Arabia being attacked. Well, it missed the radar. But if there was another system which had picked up the drones coming in, or the cruise missiles coming in, and it was on a digital platform, then we could have applied another weapon system to eliminate it. So digital transformation gets all the inputs in, and I think the answer to your question lies in integrating electronic warfare, radar with other inputs and bringing them onto the same platform so that we can think of an integrated response.
Yeah, and I will just add just one thing to what you have, what General Chandy and Gopi has mentioned, that all these vectors that we have we cannot, it's not preferred that we see them in isolation. The way we look at it is, how do you bring them together? Otherwise, if they have to work separately, then you will not be able to derive all the benefits that we are talking about. As General Chandy just now said, they are not separate. They have to be brought in, and the challenge is that to make sure that the digital platform that is being built is effective. We have another question that has come from Rajiv. Can an all-encompassing digital model be developed for border security to prevent illegal entry from western and eastern borders?
Certainly. That is the aim of digitization. As you're aware, on the Indo-Pak border in Kashmir, we have an anti-infiltration obstacle system. And even though we do have this, there are suggestions that it can be infiltrated at places which are not under observation. So if you superimpose on top of that another surveillance, maybe an airborne surveillance, maybe a satellite-based surveillance, you could actually ensure that the AIOS, which we call it the anti-infiltration obstacle system, can actually be completely foolproof. And even if someone does succeed in penetrating it, he will be picked up by some vector, as Toby said, and it goes into our integrated platform, and we can have a response to it. So the entire aim of digitization and bringing it on the platform is what you said, to bring both the eastern and western borders onto a common platform.
There is a question from Shaju Stephen. Is there a white paper on digital transformation of defense from the Ministry of Defense? And if yes, where can we access it? I don't know whether there is a white paper, but I'm sure there are very powerful insights that has been shared on this. And I'm sure if you reach out to the Ministry of Defense, and I'm sure Major Captain Jain can help for the person who was asked this question, Shaju, where he can access it. Now, there is another question which is interesting, if I could share.
All the war colleges, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force have their own war colleges. And this digital transformation is a very popular research topic. So even if you approach the war colleges, I'm sure you will get good material on this.
There's one question from Amber. How do you maintain the thin line of cybersecurity while aiming for autonomous, digitized defense system? I like the word where he has written thin line of cybersecurity. So you know it's a fine line we are drawing here. Okay.
This is very similar to the earlier question, which talked about there is a threat and it's a viable threat. The moment you enter the cyber domain, there are risks involved, and there are many techniques involved in trying to mitigate those threats. I don't think anyone can eliminate them. And as we go through, it's a game that you have to play.
There is a question from V. Ramakrishna. There is a very interesting question from Nageshwara M. Could you explain digital transformation technology in shipbuilding? It's a very specific question. I wish we had a little more time to think and answer, but we will just take a pass on that question. Sometime if you write to us, we will be happy to give you more insights on this. Why Ramakrishna has asked a good question on air gaps. Air gap between internet and intranet is mandatory in case of defense systems policy. How is data transmitted between two zones in case of forming SAP router connection to ERP production system, systems patch updation from internet when there is an air gap? As you see, this question is is a bit technical. I don't know whether if we answer this, it would do justice to all the others who are doing. But again, we all know that it's extremely important that we have to build air gaps. Why? If we have to ensure security. And we also know that there are no perfect air gaps because there are multiple ways in which these air gaps can be bridged. So are we talking about something which is possible to build, or something that we will find it increasingly difficult to build because, especially with things like encryption, quantum computing, etc., which could crack any air gap? I think the perfect air gap and the lesson that we heard from some of the people who practice security is that if you really want to ensure air gap, then those systems you have to remove from your platform. So it's sort of an arbitrage that you do, risk versus reward, speed versus efficiency. That helps you take a decision, and that's an internal decision each one must take, be it in a commercial organization, be it in a military organization. You take this decision based on where you feel the risk or the reward is the best. The last question from Lieutenant Colonel Sandeep Parija, retired. Can we use armed drones in counter-insurgency environment to reduce casualties? He has also asked, can this be applied in areas of Kashmir, urban areas of Kashmir?
Yes, Colonel, and I think that's exactly what we should do. Armed drones are feasible. We saw the attack on Aramco, and a few months earlier, there was an attack on the Venezuelan president, also with an armed drone. Certainly, we can use armed drones. The technology is in our country. We've got software engineers who can build it, and we can certainly use armed drones to reduce casualties of our security forces, particularly in insurgency areas and particularly in built-up areas.
If you see the area where the Chinese is focusing most is AI enabled with facial recognition. You are able to use AI-enabled facial recognition onto your drones. The precision at which you can identify someone is much more real. and we will avoid, we are likely to avoid many more incidents that we believe shouldn't happen.
I think then this finishes our question answer session, and these were rather very interesting questions from our audience. Thank you very much. And thank you, our panelists, Mr. Simon, Major General Moni Chandi, and Mr. Gopi Hanumanthappa for answering so many questions. I'm sure our participants are thrilled and very excited. We have had a very good participation. You will be seeing a poll on your screen. I request all the participants to please rate the quality of the webinar. And with this, I transfer again to Captain Nagesh Jain for a few words before we conclude.
Thank you, Bhumika. I'll take this opportunity to thank Mr. Toby Simon for the conduct of the webinar, where he has dwelt upon the various facets of digitization of the defense forces and how digitization can transform the Indian Armed Forces into a still more potent and lethal force. This session was interactive and generated keen interest among all participants and dealt with the future challenges that our armed forces would face and how they need to adapt over time. I also thank all participants for their active involvement, contribution, and insightful questions. There is an attractive prize for the best question asked by the participants, which will be selected by a panel and will be announced at the next webinar. The next webinar will be conducted by Professor Rajat Muna, Director, IIT Bhilai, on the topic Cybersecurity and Newer Threat Scenarios Arising Out of Advanced Technologies like Artificial Intelligence. This webinar will be held on 20th December, that is the day after tomorrow, at 3 p.m. Indian Standard Time or 9:30 a.m. GMT. Jai Hind and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Before I end this session, I would like to remind our participants that this session has also been streamed live on the Digital India YouTube Learning channel. Please subscribe to the channel and share the link with your contacts. Before I end, I will also give a tour of the Defense Expo website. You may be seeing on your screen the Defense Expo website. Here is the webinar section. You have the webinar links in this tab. Please click on this tab. When you click on this tab, there is a screen which pops up with all the links and the details of the future webinars. The next webinar is scheduled on December 20th, 3 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And the information regarding all the other webinars is also given here. Now, before I end, I take this opportunity to thank our leadership, without whom this initiative wouldn't have been possible. Shri Subhas Chandra, Secretary, Defense Production. Shri Barun Mitra, Special Secretary, Defense Production. Dr. Amit Sahai, Joint Secretary, Personnel and Coordination. Mr. Abhishek Singh, President and Chief Executive Officer, National E-Governance Division, who has given us such an encouraging and supportive environment to conduct all these sessions. Captain Nagesh Jain, Brigadier Suresh Pillai, and Captain Roy Joseph from Defense Production, Department of Defense Production. And last but not the least, the NEGD Digital India LMS team for making this webinar a huge success. Don't forget to tune in for our next webinar on 20th December. With this, I conclude here. I hope you had an enjoyable session. Happy learning. Jai Hind.